discuss what happened, the events, corrective actions that we put into place, and how we plan to proceed moving forward. So what is asbestos? Most of us are probably quite aware of what it is. It's just a group of naturally occurring minerals that are made up of very thin microscopic fibers. It did pose a lot of really good benefits, being heat resistant. It's a good insulator for buildings, homes, noise reducing, it's fireproof. It was later identified that it was linked to very serious health risks, including mesothelioma and lung cancer. Eventually, drywall containing asbestos compound was banned in 1980, and then finally in 1989, it was banned from being used in all other products. So this is an overhead view. In the middle there, this is our mobile shop, and then down below is our fab shop. So they're two shops joining by the same wall there. Our original asbestos exposure, it was discovered on February 5th, 2021. Kind of outlined it there at the first exposure area. Our carpenters were installing a lube tank on the back wall. As the carpenter was drilling into the wall, they noticed all these thin fibers start pouring out. Luckily, the individual was quite experienced and had seen asbestos before, quickly dropped the tools, walked away, contacted the shop supervisor. They evacuated the building. We notified the management team, and we got a hazmat team in to properly perform an abatement and to eliminate the exposure. Fast forward a couple of years, and we had a second exposure that was discovered on April 28th of this year. So a fab shop worker, they went out to grab some equipment from the tool storage rack that's located on the outside of the building. So it's the back side of the same wall as the first exposure a couple of years prior. The individual just reached up to the top shelf. They went to grab their tools and equipment and noticed they were covered in a whole bunch of fibers. So again, lucky that this fab shop employee, he was very experienced, knew exactly what it was, contacted the supervisor, the management team. We evacuated the building, brought in the hazmat team. And at that point, we kind of reflected, and we contacted WorkSafe BC to provide us with a little bit of guidance and how to best move forward. So we were given some advice from them to perform a site survey of all of our buildings that were constructed 1990 or prior. So we had that completed, and during this process, they identified a third exposure area. That was at the top of the mobile shop on the second floor. So again, they did an abatement there, sealed it off, eliminated the exposure. So with turning to WorkSafe, we really found, and we got some good actions in place. We were given some great guidance. So we had all the employees that had been exposed in all three exposures to complete the exposure registry form, which is available on the WorkSafe BC website. They also contacted their family practitioner just to have something documented on their health file in case if something comes up one day down the road later in their lives. The site survey was conducted on all buildings 1990 or prior, which was 8 buildings. There was no other buildings that had any asbestos containment. We had drawings of all, or blueprint drawings done for all 8 buildings as well, that kind of outlined the low risk, the high risks, and what to expect if ever drilling into those walls. We had a asbestos management survey made for us, as well as an asbestos management program. And then Apex, who was our contractor, they conducted an online training seminar for all of our on-site personnel who are in the maintenance team or people that would be involved in asbestos or may come across it in the future. So the whole process, it was quite a big learning curve for us, just because not many people had a lot of experience with asbestos on site. So I do believe that now we do have a good grasp, a good understanding of the exposures and how we can kind of mitigate it best moving forward and have a good action plan in the event it happens. So that's about all I had. I don't know if anybody had any questions or comments.
Nice presentation. I was wondering, do you have a management of change process that you would suggest to other firms um, prior to getting into a situation similar to yours that can be put in place to be ready just in case that, any asbestos is identified?
We would just refer back to the program that we had made for us, kind of follow the directives that are outlined in there, and then take the right
Okay.
course, yeah, of action.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions before we move on?
So no other questions. I think, Tom, I'll pass it over to you. And I'd like to say thanks for everybody for coming, but I have to leave a bit early. So thanks everybody, and thanks Tom for taking the second half of the meeting, and for Tammy to help out.
Thanks very much, Bill. I hope you have a great holiday.
Thanks. Goodbye.
Bye. Can everyone see the presentation?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can see it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Well, thanks very much for the opportunity to share some information with you this afternoon. As we've talked about a number of times through our regular meetings, WSN is quite active in conducting sector-specific risk assessments and root cause analysis. One thing that we've been just approached this year is that we're coming around to a point where we're conducting a second round of these sector risk assessments, and we'll be able to compare a 5-year variation between, in this case here, a 2017 risk assessment root cause analysis and one from 2023. So I think you'll find it quite interesting to see the risk perceptions have adjusted based on the events that were identified by individual firms from the logging sector, and we had both worker and management representation. And some of the evolution we've made and some of the work we still have to do to move things forward. So as I mentioned, we did do an initial logging sector risk assessment back in 2017. And this was one of our first risk assessments that we completed beyond the mining sector and logging, because of the high risk nature of the sector and some of the ongoing concerns from our perspective to move the sector forward positively and continuing to address lost time injuries. We really wanted to focus in on logging. And really, the risk assessment methodology focused on identifying risks to worker health and safety. So it was very specific to that. We worked with both employers and workers on reducing these risks, and also providing information to employers, workers, and representatives about the risks at the sector level. And we do that through a variety of modes that I'll share with you as we go through the presentation. So as I said, we've been fortunate to now have essentially a little more than a 5-year span between our initial risk assessment and the 2023 risk assessment that we conducted as well. We do have, we definitely tie in our high valued customers to each of the risk assessment and root cause analysis workshops, but we also engage in more of an advisory capacity our Ministry of Labor to share their perspective as well, and WSN staff as well, but again from perspective of just providing resource information to the group. We don't vote on any of the information, and I'll get into that in a few minutes. So the purpose of the logging sector risk assessment in both 2017 and 2023 is really to harness collective wisdom across the sector in a tripartite process to focus on industry health and along with the industry health and safety associations and the regulators of the Ministry of Labor, as I mentioned, to identify the highest risks to health and safety for the sector. We draw an approach that focuses on worker management, health and safety associations, and the ministry, and their knowledge of risk and recognizing the risk, that the risk doesn't, one size doesn't fit all for each of these. So we've done these very specifically, breaking these up into specific subsectors of the firms that WSN supports. And the approach draws on empirical insights and risk management of operations. And I've got a box here. I'm just trying to get out of my way. There we go. I'll just put it up there out of the way. And research and using decision science through our process. Okay. There we go. So I thought you'd find it quite interesting to compare a comparison of the injury statistics back in 2017 in the infographic on the left to 2023 in the infographic on the right. And usually when I talk about this, I provide a bit of context of when I started with the Forestry Safety Association here in Ontario back in 1992. There were over 860 lost time injuries for the logging sector province-wide. In 2017, there were 54 lost time injuries. So the industry's come a long way. Total injuries, which includes medical aid injuries as well, were at 182. We saw that adjusted again in 2023 with our 2022. Our 2023 data is not available yet. Trying to get this box out of my way again so I can read it. We saw total injury reductions down in 2022 to 104, and lost time injuries to 34 lost time injuries reported by the logging sector for the province in 2022. So even though the logging industry remains a very high risk sector, we're seeing some significant impact through employers and workers working proactively from a health and safety perspective and trying to eliminate those injuries, even though we're seeing in 2022 an increase in full-time equivalent workers compared to 2017. The actual injuries, we're focusing on a few key areas, and bodily reaction, which ties in with MSDs, overexertion, a variety of those types of injuries, made up a higher percentage back in 2017 as compared to 2022, but not a significant number difference if you can compare to the contact of objects and equipment, which was secondary in 2017, but became a primary area of concern in 2022 with 29% of all injuries. Interesting to see in 2022 that falls were recognized as almost 24% of overall injuries for the sector, where it didn't come on the radar back in 2017, other than potentially under the 20% of other there. So it's an area that we need to take a closer look at. And transportation continued to be an area of concern, 24% in 2017, and just reducing slightly in 2022 with 18%. Another point of interest before we move on is occupational disease. And as you can see, occupational disease, primarily in the logging sector, focusing on hearing loss, noise-induced hearing loss, is quickly approaching the traumatic lost time injuries that you'll see. And I think in the next 5 years, we'll probably see occupational disease exceed the traumatic injuries that we're seeing in the sector as the sector continues to improve. So the occupational illness is an area that I know we as an organization have to take a closer look at and see how we can work closer with industry in addressing that particular area of concern. This is Reason's accident causation model, or the Swiss cheese model, which was the basis or foundation for our risk assessments and root cause analysis. Each of the blocks in the model here identify controls that different employers have put into place for a variety of hazards in the workplace. But with each of those control measures that are put into place, there's always the opportunity because of equipment design or older designed equipment, gap in regulations, training material not kept current, fatigue, or even an unsafe action that allows gaps in the process. And with this particular model, when those gaps align, is where we can have a catastrophic incident. The workshop process is something that we engage both workers and management in. We ensure that it's open, transparent, and very collaborative throughout the whole process. We want to ensure that all perspectives and viewpoints are heard. Each response received is respected and not freely edited. And what we do prior to each workshop is ask each of the participants to actually complete a risk template and ask them the question, what keeps you up at night in relation to workplace risks? And have them provide a list of risk or risk events that they're aware of in their workplace that they see as areas of concern. And we consolidate that information. We don't edit the information as it indicates here. We try to keep it as clear as was provided by the worker or management representatives, and that becomes the basis for our workshop. And the final results are reviewed and validated with all workshop participants. As we go through the workshop, we vote on each individual risk event, we prioritize those, and then a few weeks after the workshop, we follow up with each participant and go through that information with them once more. So they have an opportunity to think about it a bit more, and they have the opportunity to adjust their scores for the overall risk. Our industry experts do all the ranking. So as I mentioned earlier, worker and management do all the ranking, not the ministry people or WSN. And the process is not about consensus, although the results demonstrate a significant degree of convergence. So we find through the workshop, as the workshop goes on, we see a lot of convergence in the discussions and the voting as people have an opportunity to share each of their perspectives and understand the other perspectives, and that creates a clear perspective from a voting point of view. The categories that we focused on that the individual risks were built under included the age of workers in the workplace, contact with material or equipment, workplace culture, driving hazards, emergency preparedness, environment, equipment maintenance, fatigue and exposure and chemical hazards, fatigue, lockout, new and young worker, psychosocial hazards, slip, trip and fall, and workplace practices. And this really is a very well-rounded approach to cover all these key areas from a workplace perspective. Each of the individual risk events, as I mentioned, are voted on by the workers, and they vote on it from two perspectives. First, they'll vote on the likelihood of the incident happening based on current controls in the workplace, and each individual risk event is assessed and voted on. And they'll vote that it would be very rare for this to happen, or almost certain that it's going to happen in the workplace based on current controls and the current situation. Then that is we move on to the next area of voting, which focuses on the consequence. So based on the risk event, if this was to happen in the workplace, what would be the consequences or severity? Would it be low or would it be very extreme? And based on those two voting parameters, we do a risk calculation and are able to build a risk heat map, which you'll see on the right here. And that allows us to really hone in on our top 10 risk events that we want to focus on. Well, these are the top 10 risk events that we came up with in 2023. Driving hazards made up 3 of the top 5 risks. And specifically, this is something we focused in on the root cause analysis. One other area, which was a bit surprising because we have a significant reduction in conventional logging or the use of chainsaws in Ontario, is that we're still having concerns with contact with machine equipment or contact from overhead debris. And that was the number 2 risk. Lockout was number 5, And it continues to be an area of concern, the inadequate or improper lockout while working on energized equipment. Workplace fatigue is something that's come on the radar, and this ties in with workplace culture to a certain extent and the nature of the workplace from a logging perspective. Psychosocial hazards, including impairment causing injury, and this could be drug or any chemical impairment that has caused an injury in a workplace, and behavior, complacency, taking shortcuts, attitude, and risk perception, which again ties in with workplace culture, contact with materials and equipment, caught in or struck by equipment. And number 10, focusing on workplace culture, lack of company or internal enforcement, including contractors. What did from that point moving forward is based on the categories, tried to tie in where is the biggest area of concern by category. And as you can see here in the pie chart, in the top 10, we had 41% of the events that were associated with driving hazards, 26% associated with machinery, lockout at 13%, psychosocial hazards at 25%, and our final one here, culture at 12%. Based on the number one risk that we decided was driving hazards and the risk category, because we had 3 out of the top 5 risk events that were associated with driving hazards, the group decided to focus on this with a root cause analysis. And these are the results of the root cause analysis in the top 11 risks. And the reason we have 11 is because we had duplication of scoring, and it just worked out at 11, so we kept it in. The number one was a deficient vehicle or older vehicle with inadequate maintenance. And one of the items that was identified here in Ontario in the winter, it's very difficult to get a truck driver and a truck in many of our logging operations. And I think we're all grappling with that, with a lack of workers, but also a lack of trucks here in Ontario. And in some cases, we're seeing inadequately maintained trucks coming on because the employer can't get anything else. So an area of concern that has to be looked at. From a culture perspective, inadequate or limited support for safety program or the IRS. And this is, again, is specifically associated with driving hazards and independent operators who are operating trucks in many cases, and some of the concerns that come out of that relationship. Measures, inconsistent complacency based on the job driver training. And one of the key things that came out of our discussions is the training is challenging for our haul drivers, and getting the training, number one. But in Ontario, in the logging industry, most of the equipment operators have to be certified. And it was identified by the group that haul drivers, because they are not required to be certified in a provincial certification program, that this may benefit in improving better training for the drivers. So that's the key reason why there's inconsistent or complacency based on the driver training. From a people perspective, lack for fit for duty program awareness and implementation, limited or insufficient standards, and coordination of company and the Ministry of Transportation highway maintenance. One of the key items that came out is that we're finding many logging operations hauling in different locations on a regular basis. Don't make any effort to coordinate that with the Ministry of Transportation, who maintains the roads. And better coordination between the two groups can ensure a prioritized approach to maintaining roads to better suit and better support the logging industry in different parts of the work areas. From an environment, inadequate forest road construction and maintenance, measures, absence, or inadequate standard operating procedures associated with radio, signage, and road maintenance. I know BC has a very effective standard for radio usage, signage, and consistent radio usage. That is not in place in Ontario. And I think a key thing that out of this root cause analysis will be something that we can maybe take something that you're doing well and try to introduce it in Ontario here. People, limited operator experience with the challenge we have for all workers in the workplace, inconsistent communication and completion of shift assessment, um, road conditions, and the vehicle. And again, the independent operators, it's a difficult area to monitor, and it's an area that the group felt could be looked at and come up with some potential solutions there. Measures, poor functioning internal responsibility system, and finally, culture, reluctance to report incidents and near misses, which doesn't allow the licensee or the main contractor to address concerns if they don't hear about them. This is a comparison of the risk assessment that was done back in 2017 to what we came up with in 2023. And it's quite telling to see the changes in the industry, as we've seen significant changes and a pandemic in between here that have changed the way we do business overall. And here's a reflection of those changes here. Mobile equipment and distracted driving was #1 back in 2017. It's interesting to see that that continues to be a challenge in 2023, with 3 out of the top 5 risk events that were identified in 2023 associated with driving hazards. Substance use in the workplace was #2 back in 2017. It fell to #7 in 2023 during our risk assessment. I think we're seeing an evolution with substance use in the workplace, a better understanding, better training, and that's a reflection of what we're seeing in these overall results here, I think. Struck by incidents were #3 in 2017, and we fell a fair ways down to #9 in 2023. And machine lockout and guarding was #4 in 2017, and it fell to #5. So still a key area of concern. So I guess what I was hoping to share here with you is the perceptions of workers and management have changed from 2017 to 2023. However, the key area that we want to continue to focus on is distracted driving and driving and hazards associated with workplace, and look at implementing and working with industry in addressing some of those control measures, those root causes that I reviewed in the last slide. The information associated with safe driving is from the 2017 risk assessment. Workplace Safety North and the Sustainable Forest Initiative partnered to develop an e-learning training program for forestry workers and staff to increase awareness of driving hazards on forest roads. And this program is now available. We have it translated in English and French. It's an e-learning program that the forest industry in Ontario has really adopted quite well. And we find it is one of our higher use programs in WSN suite of programs. We also have all the information I've shared here, as well as other information regarding the logging sector risk assessment back in 2017 and up to date in 2023 are all posted on our website. And those individual infographics are what we really encourage employers throughout Ontario to post in their workplaces, to have discussions through toolbox safety meetings with their workers and share that information and discuss how that applies to their workplace and if they're seeing consistent standards or are there areas that they may need to take a look at. And we regularly do a industry webinar, which will be scheduled for February of 2024, where we'll be sharing the overall results and final results of the 2023 risk assessment root cause analysis. You're getting a bit of a sneak peek here with some of the results that we just finished the root cause analysis 2 weeks ago. So the workshop results, as I mentioned, are just being compiled. We're also developing a related infographic for the information that's been provided through the root cause analysis, and the industry webinar will be set up, and I can share that information with Bill as well. And if any of you are interested in participating in the webinar, it's a free industry webinar that we do provincially. We can make you aware of that, and you'd be welcome to join. And that's it. If there are any questions, I'd be open to address any questions at this point.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tammy.
A good presentation.
Well, thank you. It's something that we found very beneficial from obtaining industry involvement right at the start. It gains their support throughout the whole process, and when we finish it, we come up with some very good controls that we share and are generally accepted to the most part throughout the industry.
So everybody on the call, this is being recorded, and then we'll make available the presentations that were shared today.
Well, if there are no questions, I would like to wish everyone a very happy holiday. I hope I know we're all ready for it. We've been it's been a long year, and we're looking forward to it. Merry Christmas, and look forward to meeting with your group again in the new year.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.